what we know is that giving really does make us happier. It lifts the human spirit. It's why we're here. It's why we're all here today. And one of the best ways we can give is to volunteer. Our next speaker has been working with volunteers for 5 years. Clint Bertenshaw currently works in the role of Manager, Commonwealth Projects at the Centre for Volunteers. He is an experienced operations manager, people leader, and learning and development consultant. Throughout his career, he has worked across the telecommunications, customer service, IT, and not-for-profit industries, gaining a broad range of skills, including in negotiation and mediation. Clint is an avid technology enthusiast with a deep interest in mobile technologies, internet and cloud solutions, and podcasting. Clint is an avid technology... My mistake, that's written twice. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the stage, Clint Bertenshaw.
Thanks, mate. Well, how are we all doing? It's just after lunch. I can already tell that, most of you probably already had a feeling just like, oh, can we just get to the drinks at the end of the day? Yeah. Not, all right, fair enough. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a bit of fun. When I do a presentation, I run it like when I run a training room. I hate quiet. If you guys are quiet, I feel like I'm doing something wrong, okay? I'd rather you be hurling tomatoes and eggs at me. I might be able to dodge them, I'm a pretty large target, than to be sitting there really quiet thinking, I wish this girl would just shut up. So we're going to be together for just over an hour. And the whole premise of what we're going to be talking about today, or what I'm going to be talking to you about and getting you to really think about, is how we can really change volunteering. Let's face it, we're still suffering the impacts of COVID. Yeah. Little virus popped up out of nowhere and really knocked us for six. But I want to take you to I want to tell you a bit of a story first. Go back to, it'd be coming on now, maybe 10 years ago. My family, we were getting ready for celebrating the first Christmas with my son. Had the house all set up, I had little Christmas land going on, bears everywhere and trees all looking good. Probably the first and only time we ever put a lot of effort into the Christmas tree. Had a few friends around for a bit of a pre-Christmas celebration. I'd just finished doing the bath with my son, and I had one of them come running out of the bathroom going, did you leave the tap running? No. Well, you might want to have a look at this. Suddenly there's water coming down the hall. Obviously a few expletives might have came out of the mouth, and I started to work out where this water was coming from. Let me set the scene for you a little bit here. It's absolutely pouring down where we were living in Seven Hills at the time. I currently reside in Tasmania, which is important for what I'm about to talk about a little bit later on, but don't hold it against me, but I've left Sydney. I was born and bred Western Sydney. So we're out there and we're suffering a massive storm. But it didn't make sense. The roof wasn't leaking. The taps aren't running. Where the bloody hell is this water coming from? You ever notice in your bathrooms and your laundries and all that, you have those little drains? Yeah. Let's just say that the proverbial was starting to rise. Luckily, it didn't hit the fan. And so anyway, we've got a flooded house. Fantastic. Days before Christmas. Luckily little Christmas lamb was saved, which was pretty good. Must be all those bears. But it meant that right before Christmas, we've had to sit there and do what you have to do whenever your house flooded, irrespective of whether it's clean water or brown water. As we soon learnt, there's a massive difference, and go through a massive cleanup. Effectively, we were given lemons. Not unlike most of us were given with COVID. So what do? Well, we'd been talking for a while that we needed to get some new carpet. Fantastic. Looks like we're getting a new carpet before Christmas. Wicked. We'd also been talking about how we need to go through and do a bit of a clean up to make room for bubs And eventually we were talking that there'd be 2 in the mix. So somewhere down the track, we're going to have to move my study and make room for a second baby and all that. Well, this just sped things up a little bit. In short, we did a bit of a spring clean. We took a look around. Some things had to be thrown out. Some things we salvaged. And other things we went, okay, well, it's time to actually do that move that we've been putting off for the few years since we moved in. And let's face it, we all know in our houses, if we take a look, we're always talking about those renovations or the things we want to move or the tidy out we want to do, the spring clean that never happens. So as I go through my presentation today, and I'm not even going to call it a presentation, folks, I'm going to call it a bit of a workshop, because I see you've all got microphones on your desk, and I know they worked. I was listening up the back before. So I expect a bit of interaction. Again, even if it's just to start booing, that's fine, I'm good with that. And we're going to have a chat. I'm going to give you some pragmatic advice. As you heard from my introduction, I've got a bit of a background in business, which is really quite good because it allows me to sit there and look at things and know that there's always a bottom line, there's always a cost to things and whatever else. But more importantly, I've got a real background in working with people. And that's the key to me when it comes to volunteering, and when I fell into this 5+ years ago, both volunteering myself and also volunteering and working with people and in some respects managing them, that's what I started to really learn, is it's really about the people and finding out what their motivations are. And if you can address those, well, you're going to find that then you can start to really change your programs up and get some real benefits. Now, I am going to set a bit of a disclaimer here. This is the part where you guys all sit and go, oh yeah, he's full of crap. No. There is no silver bullet to all this. I wish I could turn around and pull out the DeLorean and we all jump in and go back to the future and I'll give you a heap of time. It's not going to happen. It's one thing that is always going to be a problem when you need to affect change, is how do you do it with a lack of time? We're stretched for resources, we're stretched for our own time. But the things I'm going to tell you, you don't have to hit them all at once. Implement small steps. Sometimes even if you have to do it off the side of the desk, and we all know side of the desk translates to instead of watching Netflix. But if you do this, you'll start to find you'll actually gain some time back, because hopefully your volunteer base grows and all the stuff that's bogging you down, that's making life hard, that's making it a little bit difficult to actually progress your programs and enhance your programs will become a little bit easier, because there'll be more hands. And even if there's not, you might be tapping into other people's motivations, which will give them that enthusiasm to hopefully step up and do the work for you. So, there's always a slideshow. Now, this is just a personal plug for my family. No, not at all. Take a look at what I've put up on the screen. I'm not going to read it out to you guys. I'm sure you can all see it. But I'll tell you who I am and what I do in this context, because I want you to see that just like all your volunteers, just like you guys, I've got a life outside of work. 9 to 5. 9 to 5. That'd be a concept, wouldn't it? But I still manage to fit in volunteering. I host a radio show. If anyone's interested in tuning in, believe me, there's a reason why I've put the last line on there, that I'm a lover of heavy music. It's not for the faint-hearted. And being community radio, it's really not for the faint-hearted. I get away with a lot. But when I moved down to Tassie, I had a bit of an opportunity to sort of look at things and go, okay, well, what do I want to do to make myself happy? And I got involved with Edge Radio, a youth radio station. I mention it's a youth radio station because if you've ever worked with youth, you'll know that that in itself comes with its own challenges. And we'll talk more about that. But I still do volunteering at the station. I was their training coordinator. I still kind of am their training coordinator. This year, full disclosure, transparency, I've stepped back from 2 roles I held for too many years. Secretary of the committee, which anyone who's ever done secretariat duties knows, but that never stops. If I have to write another set of minutes up again, I think I'm going to pull my hair out. I put the show together, which, even though it's a music program, that takes quite a bit of time. Some of it pleasurable, some of it not so much. And as the training coordinator, I was continually running programs every month. Our radio broadcasting program, which all sounds fun, and then our podcasting program, which came about due to COVID. I actually got caught in Sydney for 4 months due to COVID. Came up to kick off a contract with another organisation, do a bit of instructional design. Next minute I'm being told I'm not going home. Fantastic. So what do? Well, the problem with Edge is we have no money. And I don't mind sharing that because, like you, I'm sure you're all running on the smell of an oily rag, yeah? Show of hands who's got all the money in the world and can do whatever they like. Yeah. Show of hands who's running off the smell of the oily rag. Don't be shy. Yeah, we're all there. So sometimes you've got to think outside the box. And I say that because one of the first things I did was, okay, well, we can't run radio broadcast training, which was a primary source of revenue for the station. It doesn't make a lot of money. We'd be lucky if a month that pulls in about $1.5 grand. And I'm telling you, that helps to run the station. So you can see how skint things are. Now, if I wasn't there to run it, it's not a major dilemma because our station manager, she could have stepped in. But our station is on UTAS's property. We're not owned by the university. I have to stipulate that. The uni does not give us any kickbacks. They just give us a room and a little space to put our radio gear. So we are now facing total lockdown. We need to keep the station going, and we've got automated systems and all that good stuff, the tech's there, but it's not going to help us run training. So now, for however long this lockdown's going to last, we are now going to lose a huge revenue stream. Crap. And as the secretary on the committee, I might have said a few other 4-letter words as well, because I was going to see things that some may not have been privy to, but would have not looked too good. In the lead up to heading up to Sydney, I'd actually started working on a podcasting course. And no, this isn't a plug, but by all means, if you ever see one offered and you see my ugly mug on it, feel free to join. And it was going to be face-to-face, and you'd get to play with the gear and do all that good stuff. Well, that's not going to happen when I'm stuck in Sydney. Give me 2 weeks. We'll run it online. So we did. And I thought outside the square and went, how am I going to do this? So you utilise all the knowledge and the tools that are out there. You set something up using, well, we used Google Hangouts. Why? Because we were effectively a G Suite organisation, so we had access to Hangouts for free. We couldn't afford to get a Zoom account and run one like a classroom of that, so we use what we've got. Great. So now I can get visual. What do I do as far as teaching how to use the software? Well, there's a wonderful tool out there. I think you might have heard of it. YouTube? Yeah, anyone? Yeah. YouTube's fantastic. Just about anything that's out there, someone's probably created a video on. So I thought, okay, I'll be able to demonstrate how I do things in the various pieces of software we use, but it's not the same as being able to do it live. What can I do? So I found YouTube videos that I would follow myself. And we set that up in the course. And with a little trial and error, a few nerves, and some patience, we managed to run the podcasting course not once, not twice, but thrice while I was away. Yeah, thank you. Now, I tell you all of this because the whole premise of what I'm going to be talking about is about you guys reviewing, revising, and rethinking volunteering. And I just wanted to show that I'm not full of crap. That I've been there. I've had to think outside the square. I love thinking outside the box. It might be the reason why when I got into technology, I didn't learn how to program or anything like that. Sitting there and typing all that code for one little box to appear just irritates me. I'm the sort of guy who walks up and hits it as hard as I can on the side of the box. No, not really. But we'll keep hammering it and trying different things and throwing things at it until it works. And that's what I think we need to take away and get into volunteering with. Because we are dealing with people, and as much as it would be fantastic if we were all born with our own instruction manual, we're not. Please, if you ever find that manual, can I have it? My daughter's giving me a headache. So let's get into it. I want you to take a moment to reflect. This is a little bit of personal reflection, and then feel free to have a quick chat amongst your tables. You don't have to activate the mic. But I want you to ask yourself, effectively, if the pandemic hit again, if we were stuck to go into mass lockdowns, whatever it may be, and it seems like at the moment, every time there's a new variant of anything, we're going to hear about it. So let's assume one of those variants run rampant. Could your volunteer programs continue? And if they could continue, what would it look like? Just take a moment. Now that I've got you talking to one another, fantastic. Show of hands, who could honestly, hand on heart, and believe me, no, it's a safe space in here, all right, don't worry about the cameras, but who could honestly say your program's going to be unaffected? Whatever. Will it still, okay, well let's ask that, will it still run? Right? What's the impact going to be? Hit the mic, talk to me.
The delivery has to then change. You have to duck and pivot quite quickly in going from face to face to obviously a virtual delivery. I guess for us, it was very clunky initially, but then going in and out of lockdown as often as we did, it got fine-tuned very quickly that we got to a point where we literally one day could just pick up our laptops, go home, sit down, and we just transitioned quite smoothly into the other service delivery. But that came through that constant revising, that constant kind of like what's working, what's not.
Great. Who else is in that situation where, you know, there will be an impact, but you could pivot pretty quickly? Show of hands. Okay. Show of hands who does not feel confident they could. Yeah? Don't be nervous. All right, cool. Show of hands, would you lose volunteers? Yeah. Would anyone potentially say they'd gain volunteers? I know that's an insane idea, yeah? A few hands went up, awesome, good. All right, let's look at this a little further. So the whole reason why I'm here is so that we can look at volunteering through a different lens, and I want you to almost do that for a moment. Like playing around with cameras or filters on Snapchat or Facebook or whatever you're doing, put a different lens over things. Start to think about things differently. And I want to talk about this and throw ideas. There's no wrong idea as far as I'm concerned. There are things that will work. There are things that may not work straight away, and there are things that are going to have a lot of barriers. There are ideas that will have barriers that you might have to overcome. Now, that being said, obviously we can't change certain things like legislation and regulatory rules, and we have to work around those confines. So consider those fixed barriers. The wall's too thick. You might be able to change them over time, but if you've got that battering ram, fantastic. Can you loan it out to everyone? All right. So this is a bit of a summary coming from the Centre of Volunteering. We've recently done our State of Volunteering report, and for those of you who like numbers and that, there's a couple of slides with some stats in there, just so you can see that you're not alone. Across the sector, there has been a massive impact. It highlighted the rigidness of a lot of programs. And I say that because some of it wasn't the fact that it was rigid for any other reason than that there was no reason to not fix what wasn't broken. Again, kind of like the spring cleaning idea of my house. We were functioning fine, there wasn't an eyesore, but certainly getting flooded out with brown water meant that we had to make a change. There are other concepts that we've all become quite familiar with too, such as virtual volunteering, or at least being able to work virtually. And I'll talk a little more about that. However, we do only have a limited amount of time today. So what I will say is there are going to be some concepts here today, folks, that I may drop that you want to know more about. Well, because we actually care, we have got ongoing webinars running every month at the centre, some of them being delivered by me, and I'm telling you now, they're totally free and they're open to all of you. Jump onto our website and register. Tell your friends, whatever the case may be, the more the merrier. So any concept that, and And if there's any concept I go over that I don't go into enough and you want to know more, and you can't grab me, by all means, email me. All right. So we're going to get into this. We're going to workshop a little bit. And this is where I want to actually get you guys talking to me, talking to each other, using the mics. I didn't bother with butcher's paper and all that sort of jazz. It's just wasting paper. I want you to more to think about this, conceptualise this and share with one another. And what I really loved was I was listening to Gail's presentation just before lunch there, and I was kind of a little upset because she got to drop some really awesome news right before lunch, and then it's like, here, Clint, now you can pick them up after lunch. Fantastic, thanks for that. Hospital pass, anyone? Sorry, it's all right, we'll forgive you. But the cool thing is some of the tools that are actually in that portal that you guys are getting access to, are going to make your life so much easier rather than having a multitude of software platforms. And I'll tell you now, one of the hardest things with what I end up talking to a lot of organisations about is I can tell you all the tools. I'm a nerd. We know them. I've probably got more apps. I've probably had more apps on my phone than most of you guys have had phones. But the reality of it is the more apps you put out there, the more learning curve there is, the more engagement issues you've got. So the fact that everything's been very well thought out and put into a portal that is being developed, get amongst it. Honestly, that's fantastic. And I'm gonna, just because I am so excited from what I saw before lunch, I'm gonna tell you now that that will cover off the stuff for you guys as CDATs. But if you want to talk volunteering even more, in the coming months, we've got similar portals coming at the Centre for Volunteering that will have more generic volunteer management and volunteering, best practices, tools, templates, etc., available to you. Ours is in a little knowledge base that will also allow you to drop a ticket on us if you can't find what you're looking for, to sort of like a slap in the face to say, hey, stupids, can you give us something we need? And we'll get onto it. And I say that because I'm the poor bugger who's coded a lot of it. So, yeah, I know we'll be able to do what we can do. All right. So this is what I want you to keep in mind. We're going to review over the next 45 minutes. We're going to review your volunteer programs. So I want you to think about your volunteer programs. Not having the time to contact you all and do surveys and do all that sort of stuff, I'm going to have to work organically here and get you to bring your volunteer programs to your tables. Okay, so we'll pretend I've prepared that earlier on. Talk about your programs, be open and honest, what works, what doesn't work. Is there anyone here who honestly feels they have a 100% perfect program? Awesome. So there's room to work with. Then we're going to revise. So we're going to start thinking about ways you can revise your volunteer roles and requirements. This often gets interesting because this is where you're going to find barriers. There are going to be certain things that you have to be honest with yourself and go, yes, we need our volunteers to hold this or be able to do this. But in my experience, across talking to a number of different organisations of all different walks of life, the amount of time that there is a role description there that has requirements that are completely unnecessary, must be able to lift over 5 kilos, and the heaviest thing they lift, I don't know about you, but that's not 5 kilos. Either that or I've eaten my Weet-Bix this morning. And the reasoning for that is because things have changed over time, but the spring cleaning hasn't been done. This is a great time to sit there and go, okay, we need to dust off some of the cobwebs and have a look and think, what can we do? And we'll talk more about that. And then finally, rethink volunteer engagement. You're going to attract a whole lot of new volunteers, hopefully. How are you going to engage with them? How are you going to get on the level? And I'll tell you now, this is difficult because you're going to have to work out how to communicate and engage with different volunteers of all walks of life. Working with your older volunteers, they may want to come in and sit down with a tea or coffee and have a couple of bickies, some cake. I'm partial to a bit of cake and bicky myself. But if you're working with, say, those who have got a 9 to 5, they may not be able to come and sit down with you and have the cake and bickies. Doesn't mean that they can't help you out. I go back to my radio volunteering, and the reason why I've stayed with them for as long as I have, and why I continue to seek out other volunteering opportunities with them, it's never 9 to 5. I'm able to sit there and do a lot of my volunteering tasks, role, after hours, instead of watching damn repeats on Netflix. I swear I haven't got a problem with Netflix, it's just, yeah. And weekends, meaning I can fit it in to a working career, 2 small children, my wife. I'm also studying at the moment as well. I was studying until the money was better to just sort of take a little bit of time off work and make some coin on the side. But that's how often our jobs change, our roles change, and so do our volunteers. So we've got to keep that in mind as well. So, let's review. In your tables, I'd like for you to take 5 minutes to talk about your volunteer programs. What's working, what's not working, and get ready to discuss what the greatest issues are with your programs as it stands right now. Go for it. I must say, I'm very glad there's a lot of great discussion going on in the room, and yes, I was eavesdropping. I can either take volunteers. I want 2 volunteers, 2 different tables, one from this side of the room, one from this side of the room, to talk about what you guys spoke about at your table. If not, I'm going to randomly pick numbers, and whatever table that lands on is what it is. So I'll give you an opportunity first. Do I see a show of hands on this side of the room? I'm going to go with that because, yeah, even if you're dobbing people in, I'm good with that. Please.
I was talking, and we have a volunteer program called Caravan, where once a week we go out into the community and feed people out of a caravan. So we get lots of donations of fruit and vegetables from the farmers. We get bread from the local bakeries, and the restaurants volunteer to cook a meal once a week on a roster system. Mm-hmm. So that then all comes into the centre, and the volunteers come in again, a different team, and package up all the food and take it out into community, and then come back and clean up, the kitchen and the work that was done before. So during COVID, we weren't allowed to go out because we were drawing a crowd. So we had up to 65 volunteers, which was wonderful pre-COVID. Now we're down to about 25. People are scared now to come back due to COVID. And during COVID, there was a few of us, we just volunteered and drove food around in our cars and dropped it off at people's front doors. Okay, so you're facing just the fact that you've had the volunteer drop-off, and now that we're in a much more open period of time, the re-engagement's still not there. Yeah, so we have to find another way. Okay, all right. This side of the room, who wants to volunteer? Hands up. Come on, someone put their hand up higher. I'm just going to randomly point. Right, I'm going, thank you, go for it. Saved by the bell.
We talked about the CDAT, the Wagga CDAT's been operating for around 20 years, mm-hmm. and a couple of the people on the table have been involved for that long. So I asked the question, what's kept you involved for so long? And the conversation started with, in the beginning when the CDAT formed, it was like people were co-opted to join it from services, and then it evolved from there, and that other people were involved because they had personal experiences. But then the discussion then went on into that one person was involved as an independent, and had an experience both as an independent person and a services person that went and was representing an organisation, and that there was a difference in how they could be in the CDAT as not aligned to an organisation, and also that being involved with CDAT is something that that's kept people involved, has been around, being passionate, invested in an issue that is about the community, mm-hmm. and also being valued by, I suppose, the community and CDAT organisation as well as a volunteer, but also that your own values align with what you want to volunteer to do, that it mirrors what you believe in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Beautiful. And I love that you mentioned that, because that's going to feed very nicely into the next couple of slides. So I must have shown you earlier. All right. So a big question I want you all to ask yourself is, who are your volunteers? And whenever you're interacting with them, really think deeply about that. As I started off, I gave you a bit of an insight into myself. Now, I could have given you my LinkedIn profile. That might have only shown my professional side. I could have just said, yeah, I'm a Westie headbanger with a couple of kids. That would have told you a little bit about my personal side. But instead, I've given you a few interests there, which may drive my motivation for what I do. Which leads me to what motivates volunteers to volunteer. Now, let's be clear. Particularly when I get to speak at a conference like this, the work you guys are doing is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. It'd be rewarding. I've done a bit of, I'll be honest, before this, I hadn't really heard of you before. I took some time to read into the work you do and blown away. So the motivation of doing good, big tick. But what else? What else gets a volunteer to show up and continually to show up? Is it just about doing good, or are there other things that you can tap into? I want you to take some time to think about why people volunteer and what they receive out of it. I've heard the term the volunteer pay packet used. When we work for pay. We might enjoy our jobs a lot. You may have been like me and done some absolutely horrendous jobs, but the money wasn't too bad, particularly when I was a young bloke in the middle of summer, throwing crap around a container. But it was good money for something that was pretty horrendous. But when you volunteer, you're not going to get a pay packet at the end of it, or are you? Are there things you can tap into with your volunteers to help them feel rewarded, to feel like at the end of their shift, the week, the month, the year, the whatever, they're getting paid, non-financially. Everyone's unique, and it's going to be very different for each person. For me, if you allow me to tap into my nerd skills, my passion for music, fit it into my family, allow me to do something that makes me feel maybe a little bit youthful, because at 40 years of age I still haven't grown up, and I think I'm going to try and be like Peter Pan, we'll see, although after going to a gig on Saturday night I'm starting to feel like I'm not Peter Pan anymore. You let me tap into those, you can get me to do just about anything. Which is why I've probably spent countless hours looking at spreadsheets for Edge, why I volunteered for another organisation down in Tas, putting a website together for free, why I spent ages for that same organisation putting together their newsletter for free, because they allowed me to play with different platforms and programs and spend my off time after a 9 to 5, and believe me, all this I do is after hours, doing something I love, so it doesn't feel like work. And I'm volunteering for a good cause. Some stats. I told you there was some nerd stats in here from the State of Volunteering report. You guys can take a look. What motivates volunteers? If you want to take a read of this in more depth, please feel free to head over to the Centre's website and download the report. It's not a bad read, quite interesting, some eye-opening things in there. Bear in mind, heavily impacted by COVID. So there are certain things around health, particularly when we get to barriers, that over time may change. But for the long and the short of it, you can see here, to help others, it's a big one. Well, we already know that. For social connection, great, but I challenge social connection. I remain socially connected to my Centre for Volunteering family that is down in the rocks from Tasmania. My direct line manager is in Singapore and we are practically best mates. And that's just using technology. So you don't actually have to be in the same room having cookies and cream biscuits. I definitely don't need to go near the cookies and cream biscuits just to build that social connection. Social connection can be anything. Being able to catch up even once a year for me with everyone and have a couple of snags on a barbie is enough. But still keeping the channel open, the chat, is all I need. For others, yes, they want to be in the room with them. And I state all this because then it comes down to how you redefine your roles. To use skills and experience. This one's a massive one. I want you to think for a moment. Who in this room has ever gone for a job and you've looked at the job description, the first thing it says, must have X amount of years experience for a beginner's role? Yeah. How else are you going to get that? Oh, well, if you give me the job, I'll get the experience. Employer says, yeah, nice try. Volunteer. And as volunteer managers, coordinators, people looking after volunteers, you can play a massive role in this because whilst you could turn around and you get a great volunteer who does a whole lot of wonderful work for you and then you write a reference that says, yeah, John Bloggs volunteered from this date to this date. Thank you. If you can actually turn around and state what they did, what impact that had on your organisation, maybe even if they've got something visual they can show in a portfolio, suddenly they've got real world experience that they can show to an employer and they might get the next job thereafter. And this is, originally when I heard this concept, it was projected just at youth, but this is projected at everyone of all ages. We've all transferred jobs. I mean, right now there's apparently the great resignation going on. And we're all apparently meant to be leaving our jobs and getting other ones. Okay. But what I can tell you is this. We all need to get that experience. And if you can tap into that and allow people to use the skills they've got, you're actually giving them one of the best tools you can. And suddenly, they're not going to want to run away from you. They're going to want to stay with you because they're like, hey, these people are actually looking after me. And they're going to tell their friends, hey, if you come along here, you're all right with the website, aren't you? Yeah. Well, come along, do our website for us. I'll give you a reference. You might be able to get that job. Just a thought. So, we now know what motivates them, but what stops them. And we know COVID was a massive barrier. But it doesn't have to be forever. Again, some more nerd stats. No time. Costs. Health reasons. Okay, we're not going to tap on the health reasons too much because unfortunately COVID has impacted everyone at different levels and I'm not going to go into that, but I think we all know that there are certain things we'll be able to do, set up different ways to manage COVID, and then for some people they're just not going to come back. We lost a couple of volunteers at the station who had been on-air hosts for like decades who they just couldn't risk it. There were too many factors like air conditioning, mic cleanliness, all that, but no matter what reassurance were given, they couldn't control it, so they didn't bother. That's fine. But for most part, things like no time, I challenge that. I challenge that by saying, well, is it that there's no time or is it that your programs are too restrictive? Can they do it outside of hours? Can they do it in conjunction with a 9 to 5? Do they have to show up at certain times, at certain locations to do the volunteering? Now, as I said, I haven't had the privilege of being able to talk to you all one-on-one and find out how your programs operate, but you know the answers to this. If most of you had your program survive in some sort by being able to pack up laptops and go home, why can't volunteers do certain roles as well for you? And there's a whole suite of roles you can do remotely. Social media, websites, admin. Most of our admin tools are in the cloud now, in the internet. Office 365 you can do without actually having to install Office onto your computer. And you can have your IT people put all the controls in place so that things are protected. Now, I understand you may be working on some stuff that is, they may even have to sign an NDA or some kind of confidentiality statement. And you would obviously get where you need to legal representation to find out what you can and can't do, but don't let those things be barriers for you to bring volunteers in. Then it opens up a whole new world of inclusivity. Getting people in who want to volunteer, who are damn well passionate, but they maybe can't make it out to your site or facility for every shift. Or maybe they just prefer to work from home because they suffer from some kind of anxiety. I personally, would you believe this, I am not a very social person, says the guy standing up the front of all of you. But the reality is, if you asked me to come in, if this was some kind of party and you asked me to come in, I'd be the wallflower up the back or the guy who looks for the ock-jack to sit there and become the local DJ. The reality is crowds make me anxious. So if I can volunteer from the comfort of home, or heaven forbid, using the internet from the comfort of wherever I damn well like, the cafe, the beach, I've smashed out some fantastic work sitting up at the beach, I've got to tell you. Then why not? And you're getting the work done. And there are tools we can talk about on how you can manage all that, and I really do recommend join us for other webinars and the like where we really dissect that further. But even just setting expectations can help people who are passionate and who you're giving an opportunity to stay on task, and then you've knocked down one of the best barriers, or one of the biggest barriers. Address the barriers and embrace their motivations. And you'll get volunteers, hopefully, knocking on the door. So, a bit of a discussion, obviously, because I've got the speech bubble up there. Have a think in your tables again, what activities get most volunteer engagement within your CDAT? And what activities, roles, are you struggling to get volunteers for? What I'd like is, again, I'm going to pick on a couple of tables, so be prepared to tell me what activity you're struggling to get volunteers for. We'll give you about 2 minutes on this one. Go for it, have a chat. All right, everyone, 2 tables again. I'm going to pick on this table up the back here. What sort of activities are you struggling with getting volunteers to get involved in?
We're not really struggling at the moment, I don't think, but we did a manga art anime. We did a manga art anime project with the Warhope High School, which was good.
Mm-hmm. And all right, so working with the high school, how'd you keep them engaged?
So there was a group of, I think it was like 4 groups, and they put together. They were doing a mural on, like the local area was affected by the floods,
yeah.
and so it was all about them coming together and creating a space for their canteen area.
Okay, so tapping into probably the most important part of any high school, the canteen. I love it. All right, let's go middle table just here. Go for it. Just to put you on the spot.
I was just sharing some experience I've had with working as CDO with CDATs and the volunteer experience. Volunteers really want to get engaged, and I talk about community member volunteers, so with really practical activities, so where they really feel like they've really got something to add, something of value, and that they've got some expertise in an area. And the area where they don't so much want to get involved is in the planning, where they feel as though maybe, that people from a service background would have more expertise in planning, whereas we're sort of saying, it's a community focus, and we really need to hear your experiences as well.
Great. So what I'm hearing there is that when they're able to tap into their skills, they're quite engaged, but then you've got actual activities you need to do where you need a certain level of skill and potentially not able to get those volunteers in, yeah?
Yeah, or even just for them to feel comfortable to add add their point of view or their life experience.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right. Now I'm going to boot through a couple of slides pretty fast because I knew I was going to do this. Have slides just in case I couldn't get any conversation out of you. But you guys have been very accommodating. So one thing I want you to always ask yourself when you're looking at your role, is it meaningful? So often I've worked with organisations where they think that the roles that they're getting volunteers to do is meaningful because they need to get done, but in reality, not so much. How does it tap into their motivations? Which I can already hear, You guys are starting to think about that, but what else can you do? And sometimes it comes down to, and I'll give up one of the slides from a bit later on, just talking to them. It takes time, but actually sitting down and having a conversation, it doesn't have to be formal. Okay, you don't have to bring them into a room and sit them down like it's a one-on-one. In fact, if anything, that can often get people to close in. Informal, when you're passing, wherever it may be, over a quick chat, whatever the case may be. What is it you do? What brings you here? Why have you been hanging around for so long? You like a bad smell, seriously, can we get rid of you? No, I love it here because of this. Well, then tap into that. Does it require any specific skills or a new way of thinking? If you've got something that you need to get done and you don't have the volunteers for it, start thinking about where you can go for them. Here's an idea. If you're looking for someone to help you with planning or some kind of project management, maybe see if you can't get your roles advertised within, say, a project management RTO, TAFE. Even in schools like in the senior years where they're learning to do that. Now, obviously, you're going to have to be careful depending on the skill level and what you need, but you then can help them get their experience to go on their portfolio to potentially get the project management job they're hoping for. A question I always put out there, which often separates the menial tasks from the good task. Would you do it if you were not being paid? Now, I have done many a horrid job, and at the end of the day, the coin. Would I do it for free? Not on your Nelly. So always keep that in mind. Now, sometimes you can't get everything to be that wonderful, but try and run the filter through it. All right, so now we're going to renovate. We've had to think about who our volunteers are, why they're volunteering. We're now going to renovate our programs. And like I said, it comes down to talking to your volunteers. What makes them tick? How can you get them more involved? Do they have passions? Do they have things that have potentially changed in their life? What can they bring to the table? COVID has changed everyone. Maybe a little, maybe a lot. How are you going to tap into that? And the reason why someone walked through your door on day one could be very different to why they're still here now and why they've disengaged a little bit. Maybe it is someone who was a loyal volunteer, but during COVID, they suddenly took up grandparent duties. Here, Mum, can you look after the kids? And now you're my free childcare. But they're still passionate about what you do. Can you get them involved on different days, different times? Can they maybe do shorter shifts? Do they have to put in a full day's work, or could they just come in for a couple of hours? And you maybe have a couple of volunteers break a shift up. And keep in mind, everyone plays a role. Now, when I go back to talking about Edge, we have some volunteers who I am lucky if I see once a year. They'll show up maybe at an outside broadcast. So an outside broadcast is a big event for us. It's where we pack up a whole bunch of gear, take it out on site and transmit from wherever we are. And suddenly all the volunteers come out of the woodwork. It's exciting, it's fun. There's something to do. They don't want to work in the back office. They don't want a bar of it. And to be honest with you, I don't blame them. It's pretty bloody boring. And I love that. They show up for events and they are the biggest advocates of ours. They're the ones who, when they're not volunteering, are actually volunteering because they are spruiking your programs. They're talking about your programs to their friends, to their family, to anyone who'll damn well listen. And let's face it, with social media now, that's a lot of ears you can get in, or eyes. So don't feel like you've lost volunteers just because they're not necessarily there. Keep them engaged, find out what they can offer, what they will offer, and keep them on the team. Because if you make them happy, they'll stay team players. I'm going to skip over this. This is just more of a discussion around, what sort of things you could do to tap into their motivations and what transferable real-world skills they could bring. I think we've already started to unpack that a little bit, but keep that in mind. When you're hitting on motivations, how can you tap into real transferable skills? Like, I love the idea of maybe getting someone involved in project management or even just planning, particularly if they're trying to do a degree in it. Okay, so when it comes to re-engaging volunteer roles, now some of you may have already encountered this, some of you may be still on the journey. Think about flexible time commitment. Everyone's life was impacted in some way due to COVID. At one stage, we actually had a massive drop in our volunteers for a radio station that runs 24/7, and we were able to do it remotely. Why? Because they were the sort of volunteers who just wanted to show up, and it was more of that social aspect. They wanted to be in the back office, mucking around, doing whatever. But we also gained a lot of new on-air hosts because they were able to record remotely from home using some microphones and whatever else and sending it in. So it fluctuated. What we expected was the unexpected. Now we actually got to manage all these people who want their shows on air, but that's a whole different conundrum. Flexible locations. We have proven, I'm proving to you, that you can operate from anywhere thanks to the wonderful little thing called the internet. Now, I'm not going to get into an argument about whether NBN is any good or not. Don't get me started. Where I am in Tassie, I'm on rural side of Kingston, which is basically Amish country as far as I'm concerned, because the technology is not so good. It's pretty rough. Fixed wireless broadband, yes, that's good stuff. But my work does not expect me to work from home. My volunteering doesn't expect me to volunteer from home. I volunteer, I work from where I like. I found a great little co-working spot 3 minutes down the road, wicked internet, unlimited coffee, which is great. I rarely go into the studio. I do a lot of it remotely. Yet it's in, a couple of suburbs over. But why travel if I don't have to? Plus, I can go down to my office 24/7, so once the kids have gone to bed and the wife's sick of looking at me, I can go and do my volunteering. And believe me, sometimes that's good for a marriage. Restrictions and requirements considered. Now, again, I can't go into all your individual situations, but look at what restrictions you've got in your job roles. And ask yourself, is it necessary? Must have a driver's license. Is that really necessary if they're never going to get behind the wheel of a car? Was it just because somewhere in there you needed it because people had to travel out to a weird location and since that time you've moved? Look at your requirements. Do they need to lift up over 10 kilo when the heaviest thing's a pen? Do they need to be on site to do this job? Do they need to do a 6-hour shift? Is there any reason why you couldn't split a 6-hour shift into 2 3-hour shifts? That now means someone who's got to drop the kids off at school, wants to do a bit of volunteering and be there to pick them up at 3 p.m, can do it now. And then can you alternate it? And suddenly you've also got a little bit of, backup for one another. Heaven forbid if someone manages to get sick. Forget COVID at the moment, this damn flu that's getting around scary enough. And have clear and trackable outputs. Make it clear. Talk to your volunteers. Say, this is what I need from you. This is when I need it. And talk to them. Can you achieve that? If you think they're sitting there going, yeah, and you're like, I just saw your eyes glaze over. There's no way. Talk to them. Are they scared? Talk to them. Why? And reset the expectations. And think about project-based activities. Now, some of you talking around the room, I can already hear you do a lot of this already, so I won't preach to the converted. But this is a great way to keep volunteers in. Engage them, mobilise them, let them go. Engage them, mobilise them, let them go. And let them come and go as they need to. You'll always have the army. And again, break larger roles into smaller ones. I love it when people say, I need a marketing coordinator. Do you? And how much are you charging for that? No, I need a volunteer marketing coordinator. Really? So you want someone to come and do for free what you could possibly get out in the market for about 70 plus K a year. Awesome. Love your work. Break it down. Maybe what you need is someone who can update the website, someone who can post the social, someone who can write copy. 3 volunteers could do that, and suddenly a whole role is so much smaller and manageable and can be done, heaven forbid, all of that could be done remotely. So we're going to need to rethink our roles and think outside the box. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes now to just quickly talk about communicating with your volunteers. And we're going to quickly just touch on a few tips to help. And we are, as I say, we are running short of time. I could easily, if you can't tell, I could talk for hours on this sort of stuff. But I want you to think about how you're communicating with your volunteers and what struggles you are potentially having, particularly amongst different cohorts of volunteers. 2 minutes, go. Okay, so sorry to shave it a little bit thin. I do want to get through a couple more ideas with you guys. I think the key message out of this is when it comes to communicating with your volunteers, there's a lot of different tools out there and you're going to need to adjust potentially for the type of volunteers and also not only the age bracket, the type of volunteer and also the skill set. I say that because as you start to bring in different volunteers, and this can actually be really nightmarish, they're all going to want to be communicated with a certain way. Some people like to sit down and have that face-to-face communication, and that's fantastic. But if you are now starting to get projects off the ground where you might need people who are maybe a little bit more introverted, they might only want to communicate to you via chat mechanisms. Yeah, which can be a little bit fun, you know, dealing with emojis and all that sort of great stuff. But it is worth the effort because you'll probably find that then you'll actually get some real responses from them. I use this I was talking to one particular organisation who was saying they just don't respond back. This was actually a university student life program. I said, oh yeah, how are you communicating them? Via the newsletter. Yeah, what? I said, okay, so hang on a second, correct me if I'm wrong, but your volunteers are predominantly students, yeah? Yeah. How many emails are they potentially getting as a student? Oh, pretty obvious, but they hadn't thought of that because they'd always communicated via the newsletter, wondering why people weren't showing up to events and the like. They're students. You've got classmates on projects emailing, you've got lecturers emailing, the uni emailing, blah, 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 and they're meant to expect to read a newsletter for their student life program. I said, have you ever thought about setting up a channel through, say, Slack or Facebook or something like that? Oh, yeah. Well, I said, try it. Now, if I've said anything just then in those sentences that absolutely spun you out and you're like, what are you talking about? Please come along and catch up on one of the sessions. I could spend another hour on that. But there are platforms out there that, would you believe, are free that people love using. And if worse comes to worse, it doesn't cost all that much to SMS people nowadays. A little more work if you want to do it completely for free. But even the old SMS to say, oh, you coming to this? Can actually be enough. Another thing that's also you might need to change your thinking of is when you want to reach out to new volunteers, and this is what I'd like to close on today, is about where to look and what the benefits are as we are all trying to recoup our volunteer armies, is where are you looking? And sometimes it's even as, you know, you might even have to have a bit of a search under the bed, as the little boy in the picture's doing. You've got to look far and wide, and there are plenty of tools out there. Word of mouth is still one of the largest forms of recruitment out there. But the problem sometimes with word of mouth is that you get the same people all the time because they are from the same networks, the same type of communities, the same people talking to people similar to them. Which means that if you are after particular skills or ideas or concepts, you may have to go a little broader. So think about social media. But I'll tell you now, don't just whack a post up on social and expect that that's going to get traction. Mark Zuckerberg does not love us, and he'll sit there and make that fall to the bottom. You've got to put some video in that. You've got to put some visual to it, and you're probably sitting there going, oh God, now he's saying we're going to be video editors. No, there are great tools, and I'm going to spruik this one. Please join me on Thursday for a webinar I'm running where we talk about virtual volunteering, and I'll talk about some of the other platforms. But I also mentioned two things that I highly recommend you checking out. Canva for picture editing. Oh yeah, the nods are happening, yeah. Well, if you love Canva, you'll love Biteable, and no, they don't pay me for putting together little videos. It's like making slideshows that actually move around. It's wicked. Biteable. So the benefit of that, folks, is that now you can get on socials and start moving to the top. You'll also find that there are tools out there like Go Volunteer, Seek Volunteer, and because you're all in New South Wales, contact the Centre for Volunteering and put up the roles that you're looking for. We can assist you with that. These tools are out there, and be bold in what you are asking for. Last night I took a bit of a look at some volunteer roles that are currently online, and some of them were pretty ho-hum in the way they were written up. And all it would take is a few tweaks, and you would actually sitting down and breaking up the role a little bit and putting the word remote in it would help. And you're going to suddenly find that people are going to be looking at these going, yeah, I could have a crack at that. Probably also should say promote the benefits, guys. Really promote the benefits here. And if it's free coffee you're offering, promote that. You'll be surprised how many people will work for a free coffee or an energy drink, whatever. Spread the word far and wide. A lot of it for not-for-profits is free or very, very cheap. And think about who you're targeting. If you're going after youth, newspapers won't work. But if you've ever walked outside of JB Hi-Fi, those street press magazines, the music, which has been in Sydney for a long time, is a great place to advertise, particularly if you've got an event coming up. Doesn't have to be all about music. But a lot of youth, I've been collecting that ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper from when it was drum media. Now it's the music. And for not-for-profits, very cheap to advertise. Most importantly, folks, you're not alone. You've heard from Gail, the portal, which is coming for you all. And I've told you today that we've got tools available at the Centre for Volunteering that we offer for free. So we put our money where our mouths are. We want you to succeed in your programs. I want you to succeed in your programs. I'm very passionate about volunteering and making the sector just hum beautifully. We all took a massive kick to the knees with COVID, but there's no reason why we can't recover stronger, better, with just a little bit of revision, rethinking, and redesigning our volunteer programs. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Clint Bertenshaw. Now, Clint, right at the end, just a quick question. Right at the end, you mentioned about the benefits of volunteering. I'm just curious, personally, what's the biggest benefit you've seen in your life from volunteering?
The ability to put into practice everything I've just said. When I've started volunteering with the radio station, as long as I don't cost them an arm and a leg, they let me do whatever I like. I've now gained skills that have allowed me to transfer into different roles. And at one stage I was a freelancer. So being able to have these skills and be more confident when I went out to market to say, hey, I can do this, was fantastic. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Clint. And we do have the token bucket hat for you.
Look forward to this.
Thank you for sharing your
Loving it.
expertise with us today. Clint. Volunteer to wear the green hat.
Let's give a hand.
Cheers. Thank you.